Abdullah, here we are all staff. We need at least one student. Otherwise,
I am so glad I'm not the last one to join, but there was some sort of a typo in the email, the previous email about the Zoom link.
I see. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You know, now we encounter problems in teaching that we never encountered. It's new life, you know. Usually when you are 5 minutes late to a lecture, it's not so terrible, unless you're really punctual, unless you're German. I can say these Germans here are not really German.
No,
But,
absolutely.
but if you are late 5 minutes for Zoom, you really feel bad. I don't know why.
Because people notice it. And we were not ready for this at all. I did 2 funerals this morning.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And in the madrasa, did anybody teach you how to do funerals over Zoom? I am just sitting to breathe, so I changed my clothes to a little bit more comfortable one.
Hello, Annika.
Hello.
Hello, Alexander.
Hi.
You want to introduce, to make the introductions?
Yeah, we could do that. So I think this is the whole group which will meet now. So Abdullah, to make sure, usually we are not just the 4 of us, but are groups of around, well, let's say 12 to 15 to 20 people. So that may be really, really one of the big differences we have today compared to our other readings. And so what we can do now and will do now is read just a very, very short text together and see what we can discover. The chance is that it is a text which may be, well, very, very easy and simple at first sight, but maybe reading it together, joining our perspectives, bringing them together, may lead us to some deeper insights. Hopefully, let's see. Sometimes, Abdullah, it works, and sometimes it may not work as well. You always need the people who read and share their ideas. Otherwise, we can't do anything. So the people you see here and meet here is Annika Melix, who is really a brilliant student from Leipzig University.
Don't blush. It's okay.
Who is with us for quite a long time, and actually is very, very inspired by our Bible reading, and even thinks about doing something about what we do in her dissertation, which will hopefully start in January. First of all, Annika has to complete her final exams, which she hasn't done yet, and she will have her last exam with me on December 18. So she is really in a very, very special position here. And I'm very glad that you made it, Annika, and that you are with us here. And
I have special prayers. We all have
Yeah.
that.
Annika,
Thank you.
I didn't get it. You finished the dissertation already?
No, I'm not even started. I'm finishing my exams now.
Ah, I see. And
End
what
of
you-
this year. And then in January, I'm starting my PhD or like my
I
doctorate.
see. And what do you think your dissertation will be about?
It's not quite clear yet.
If you want to do it about something with Bible reading, I'll be very happy to share a few things that I wrote that are still draft level. For 5 years, I'm working on it. 4
Oh,
years.
wow, yes.
And all I got is a bunch of drafts of ideas, but if you choose it, I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, I'd love to. I will come back to that.
Okay.
thank you so much. And Abdullah, you know the rest of us, right? Axel was with us as well when we met, right?
I feel like I know you already, all 3 of you. I'm very happy to meet you, Axel. I'm a professor of Islam and Imam at Duke University in North Carolina. North Carolina is on the east coast of the United States. It's about 5 hours south of Washington, D.C. I am just a new kid in the block. You have much more experience with this group, but good luck with exams and all the rest of it. We all have been there. Just to comfort you, it only gets worse from there on. It only gets more painful.
The happiest time is doing the dissertation.
Yeah.
Yes. It gets well.
Fantastic.
It's all down the hill from there.
Exactly.
Well, that may be true. Let's see. Well, and so what we try to do now is just have a very short reading together, as I said. If you are willing to and want to do that and want to share this little experience, Rav Shabtai, can I also do some screen sharing, or can only you do
No, if you email me the link or something, I don't know how you do two screen sharings at the same time.
No, not at the same time. What I would need is just for a short introduction that
Sure.
you give me the chance to share my screen as well. And afterwards,
I will do. So right now you want you to share, please.
Yes.
Okay, here you are. You're there. Just share.
Yes, wonderful. So what I have to share is not really amazing, but I thought, well, we could have a short look at what we will read now, just some short verses about Elisha. Abdullah, you know that we finished some reading on Elijah, the prophet, last summer when we last time met physically. And now we thought, let's jump into the Elisha stories. Rav Shabtai, I don't know if this is a really original picture of Elisha. When you browse the internet, you get this picture of him, of an icon, an Orthodox icon, but there is not so very much what we know about.
Yes, we know that he was bald.
That's the only thing we really know. That's right, and that's, well, not so very, very important. We know how he became a prophet. Actually, in the very beginning, in 1 Kings 19, we read that actually immediately after the amazing story at Mount Horeb, where Elijah the prophet, well, listens to God anew and fears that God is speaking in silence to him. And immediately afterwards, he gets three things to do, Elijah the prophet, and one is to cast his cloak upon Elisha and actually to make him his assistant. In verse 21, we read at the end, and then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. So this is the first thing we learn. In the second book of Kings, we read a lot more about Elisha. Actually, there are quite a lot of Elisha stories, starting in 2 Kings 2, where Elisha is actually made prophet and successor of Elijah. And then we have quite a lot of interesting stories. But actually, this page, Rav Shabtai, is also very, very interesting. As you can see, it's from a very Christian perspective. In the last line, you can read how Christ can be found in 2 Kings. But this is not what I would suggest to discuss at the moment, just to show where we are and what we will read together. These are the Elijah stories, just a very, very brief overview. Elijah taking to heaven, Elisha succeeds Elijah. Then we have this Moab story. We will immediately afterwards jump into 2 Kings 4, Elisha and the widow's oil. We have this very long story, Elisha and Naaman. Quite an interesting story. Actually, I had to do the first sermon I ever had to preach publicly was on 2 Kings 5. So that was my first way of trying
Don't dare take anything from the church, we'll catch you. If you steal anything from the charity box, we'll
Right, that's the point.
Yes.
Well, and then you have some more stories and a very, very interesting combination of Elisha with the revolt of Jehu, and in 2 Kings 13 we read about Elisha's death. Just to give you an impression of where we are. The story we will read, the small little story, is the story about the widow and the oil, a story which was not painted so often in the arts. And maybe the main reason is that painting the story is not so really very, very interesting. This is actually a very old illustration stemming from Luther's Bible of the middle of the 16th century. So here we see the widow in the center with these jars of oil. We see her 2 sons bringing more jars. And actually, this is what can be shown. And this is what other illustrations also show, the widow in the middle, 2 sons, and here we have another son in the back of this picture. Actually, it's a story which is also easily accessible for children. A little jar of oil. This is all what the widow has. It seems to be a very simple, a very easy story. And my question at the moment is just, can we discover a little more in it than just a widow gets some more oil from Elisha, which is the line of story. And the point is, of course, that all these illustrations don't show us one thing, and this thing is the dialogue, which actually happens between Elisha and this widow. And I think we should read this and discover maybe some things in this dialogue. And the first thing to do would be now, and now Rav Shabtai, if you can share your screen again, that could be helpful, that we read the whole story, verses 1 to 7, in 3 languages. That's at least what I would suggest at the moment. As it is a very short story, we should read it in German, in English, and in Hebrew.
And in Arabic, if you have a good Arabic version of the
do you have, Abdullah? Do you have an Arabic version of the Bible with you?
Yes, we did. He was reading from it. Our guy from Egypt, what's his name?
No, of course there is, but Abdullah, do you want to read in Arabic the story to us?
It will take some time for me to locate it. I am joining from my house. My Arabic Bible is in my office.
Okay.
Nice.
That's just
you know, when they ask you charity, you say they gave it the office already.
That's right.
Wonderful. So my idea would be that Rav Shabtai, you read it in Hebrew, then these 7 verses, and I don't know who wants to read the English version. Someone volunteering for the English text? Maybe Annika.
So I
can read it, but if Rav Shabtai shows it to me on the screen, because I don't have an English Bible here.
No, here it is.
Fine? Yeah.
You see?
I can read it. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So Annika will read the English, and Axel, do you want to read the German version just to get it?
So could you have it online? You have it online, or you have your Bible on your knees?
Axel, do you have your Bible, or do you have it online?
I have a Bible on my table, so.
So
okay.
you cannot share it with us. Okay.
No, I only can twist it.
Do it. Okay. So usually, Abdullah, we are very, very much better prepared, as Rolly usually prepares a real little booklet with all different language versions side by side, but he apologized and can't do it today. He is somewhere in the car, and well, doesn't seem that he could do it in time.
And the dog ate the homework and all that. Yes.
And all of that, right. So Annika, maybe we start with the English version and you read these 7 verses to us. Thank you.
Yeah. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant, my husband is dead, and thou knowest that the servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondmen. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow the vessels abroad from all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou should shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, There is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil, and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest.
That's it.
Thank you so much. We stop here at verse 7. a small, little, wonderful, happy story with a good ending. This is what we can say. Rav Shabtai, the Hebrew, would that be?
אוקיי. ואישה אחת מנשי בני הנביאים צעקה אל אלישע לאמור, עבדך אישי מת, ואתה ידעת כי עבדך היה ירא את השם, והנושה בא לקחת את שני ילדיי לא לעבדים. ויאמר אליה אלישע, מה אעשה לך? הגידי לי, מה יש לך בבית? ותאמר, אין לשבטך חול בבית, כי אם אסוך שמן. ויאמר לכי שאלי לך כלים מן החוץ, ואת כל שכנייך, כלים ריקים, אל תמעיתי. ובאת וסגרת הדלת בעדך ובעד בנייך, ויצקת על כל הכלים האלה, והמלא תסירי. ותלך מאיתו ותסגור הדלת בעדה ובעד בניה, הם מגישים אליה, והיא מוצקת. והיא כמלות הכלים, ותאמר אל בנה, הגיש אלי עוד כלי. ויאמר אליה, אין עוד כלי. ויעמוד השמן. ותבוא ותגד אל איש האלוהים, ויאמר לכי מכרי את השמן, ושלמי את נשייך, ואת ובנייך תחיי בנותר.
Thank you very much. And Axel, we'll hear the German text.
Und es schrie eine Frau unter den Frauen der Prophetenjünger zu Elisa und sprach, dein Knecht, mein Mann, ist gestorben. Und du weißt ja, dass dein Knecht den Herrn fürchtete. Nun kommt der Schuldherr und will meine beiden Kinder nehmen zu leibeigenen Knechten. Elisa sprach zu ihr, was soll ich dir tun? Sage mir, was hast du im Hause? Sie sprach, deine Magd hat nichts im Hause als einen Krug Öl. Er sprach, geh hin und erbitte draußen von allen deinen Nachbarinnen leere Gefäße, aber nicht zu wenig. Und geh ins Haus und schließ die Tür zu hinter dir und deinen Söhnen und gieß in alle Gefäße. Und wenn du sie gefüllt hast, so stelle sie beiseite. Sie ging hin und schloss die Tür zu hinter sich und ihren Söhnen. Diese brachten ihr die Gefäße herbei, und sie goss ein. Und als die Gefäße voll waren, sprach sie zu ihrem Sohn, reiche mir noch ein Gefäß her. Er sprach zu ihr, es ist kein Gefäß mehr hier. Da stand das Öl. Und sie kam und sagte es dem Mann Gottes an. Er sprach, geh hin, verkaufe das Öl und bezahle deine Schulden. Du aber und deine Söhne nährt euch von dem Übrigen.
Thank you very much for reading the story to us. Actually, what I would have loved to do now with you is to split our group in two small groups for about 5 minutes, or 7 minutes, but this might not be a very good idea as we are only 5 people all together. So my great Rav Shabtai, my great methodological idea was that we have 2 people in this story, the widow and Elisha, and that we would have a chance if the 2 groups concentrate on each of these perspectives. What is the perspective of the woman, of the widow? What do we learn from what she says? What do we learn from her reaction? What do we see here? And the other group would concentrate on Elisha. What does he say? How does he react? Is there something we learn from his words? Is there something strange in what he says? Is everything clear? Are there open questions? But my suggestion now, Abdullah, you have something to say, I see that. My suggestion now would be that we do it all together and stay together in our small little group.
I would like to make a suggestion. We have 4 people there. We have the dead husband, which is very important. He's dead, but he's in the background. He's the reason for the whole story. Maybe should put his perspective. And also the children. The children, what I think it's astonishing from the children point of view.
Yeah, you're completely right. These are 2 more figures or 3 more figures in the story. 2 sons, but we don't really learn so much about them. And they don't say anything.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, okay. And Abdullah, you wanted to say something.
I am just mesmerized that Rab Shabtai can communicate with the dead people. So that in itself is how are we going to find out the dead person's perspective is a whole different test. If I may, for an outsider, before we dive into the text, can you give a little bit more background information? Are Christians and Jews traditionally have read this text differently? Or does this text any theological underpinning or weight in the tradition? What is it known for? Some background, because this story doesn't exist in the Muslim tradition.
So I'll tell you about the Jewish tradition. There is a lot of Jewish tradition around this story, but I'm trying to ignore it. This is the whole point of our reading. We are not trying to teach tradition. We are going to go into the text and see what the text means to us. We try to find ourselves in the text. This is like Umberto Eco. We try to use a little bit semiotics, if possible, to other places in the Bible, but actually you cannot, as I told you before, I've envisioned it that you have a magnometer at the entrance of the room that beeps if you bring yourself of any other authoritative text or authoritative hermeneutics. All you can bring like to an airplane is what you think in your brain. They cannot wait and they cannot check. But whatever you try to quote an authority, not here. There are many forums that do it. I think we should take the text as is. And and when I see this form, especially when I listen to the English and listen to the German, I try to think about it as something totally new that came to me just right now. There is, but if you want tradition, I'll tell you some traditional saying. If someone asks you about a boy that a girl wants to marry, and how is he? So the Jewish saying is, had he been in this woman's room, the oil would have poured forever. Because such an empty vessel, you know, he's infinite emptiness. But this is besides, you know, this is external. Yes.
So that's one of the principles really of our reading. It does not mean that we never share any tradition. Of course, Rav Shabtai has some very, very interesting points of the Midrash tradition he sometimes shares. Sometimes we Christians also have some points to share. For us, Rav Shabtai, it may not be so complicated, as Elisha does not really play a very central role in our Christian tradition compared to Elijah, who is really very, very central also for Christian theology, Christian thinking, for Christology. Elisha is surely not. He is not a very prominent figure, but this story accompanies me for many, many years, of course, as I heard it in my children's Sunday services quite a lot of times, and in the kindergarten quite a lot of times. So I'm familiar with the story for maybe 45 years or something like that, without the story being one which I ever really read or studied. So it may be sometimes easier, Rav Shabtai, for Christians, as we don't read the text so very well and we don't jump so deeply into the text sometimes.
By the way, in the Muslim tradition, they have Elijah also, because he's the one that hails the Messiah.
Yes. Elijah is very prominent.
Yes.
And he is a lot more pleasant in the Muslim version than the Christian version.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But yes, okay, I understood. That's methodologically intentional, that you don't bring too much supplemental stuff. You just take the text as is, and that's the mission. I'm here to learn. Let's go for it. Let's dive in.
But Abdullah, that's fantastic what you do now, because this is why we are here together, just to give you a feeling of how we read. So we can't really show you a reading now, as we don't have students with us, so many. Just one very brilliant student. But when you raise your hand and ask methodological questions, I think that's perfect, because then we can discuss what this reading might be like and what we might be doing. And as we told you now, this method of trying to get into one perspective of a text especially if it is a narration, is one we do, for example, quite often to try to find out what may be Elisha's perspective, what may be the widow's perspective. Do the sons, the two sons, have to say something? Do they play a role, or are they just arbitrarily mentioned here? Does the husband who died have a role, or whatever? So this is one of the methods we use sometimes to get into a text. But now I would suggest that we just read some of the verses again and try to discuss what's happening here and see where we get to. And Abdullah, whenever you want to just ask questions or share our reading.
He can answer the questions.
Or answer the questions or whatever. So let me read verse 1 again. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant, my husband, is dead. And thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditors come to take unto him my two sons to be bondmen. So we only hear the women who approaches Elisha. Is there something which you discover here, which strikes you here? Rav Shabtai said that the dead husband plays a role.
Okay, I agree. If Abdullah's Teda can communicate with the dead husband, I think it's amazing. And I just thought of it really now. It's not in our tradition at all, so I'm not responsible for what I'm saying. But actually, there are two creditors here and two debtors. There is a creditor that they owe money to the creditor, and the dead husband is a creditor. Because he says, God owes me, or you, Elisha, owes me. Because my husband was feared, did fear the God always, so someone owes him. So actually there is not one debtor and one creditor and one debtors. It's some kind of, and I think I owe money to this creditor, and God owes me because my husband feared the Lord all his life. My husband was dead and knows that I son did fear the Lord. So if the creditor can take my two sons to be bondsmen, then God should pay the debt to my dead husband.
Yeah. Actually, in just saying this, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, the woman raises a huge question. He feared the Lord, he is dead now, and I am here with these boys and all the trouble I have. So that's the big theodicy question somehow, also in just one sentence, right?
Yes. Otherwise, so what? She can say, I'm in trouble, and that's it, help me.
Yeah.
The dead husband is because you owe me. You, as the representative of God, owes me. Not me, my dead husband.
Not only you as the representative. I mean, it is said that well, in a way, the husband was a disciple of Elisha, wasn't he? I mean, he obviously was some kind of prophet as well, and so there is a connection and maybe a special responsibility from Elisha.
It's a wonderful point, but what does she claim? If you are right. So
I mean,
if you have been the wife, you would have said, you knew my husband, so you have to help me. But this is not what she says.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, why does she go to Elisha? I mean, she could have gone anywhere.
Right. Good point. Right?
Right. And of course, there is a word which is really amazing. There cried a certain woman. In Hebrew, it's tza'akah, so that's really crying, shouting. Actually, the German translation says she shouted, schrie eine Frau. So that's amazing, but she doesn't cry for help, but just somehow describes her situation, or the situation they are in with these two creditors, let's say, with God, Elisha, and her problem with the other creditor. So I think it's amazing that she doesn't say, now come on and help me, but she just cries out with her situation, describing her situation.
Yes. So the question is, how do we interpret tzaka, cry? Cry could be a complaint. You go to court and you complain, or you go to God and you complain, or you just cry from your heart, from a broken heart, because you have nothing to do.
Yeah.
But here it seems like crying to court. She has a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah. Annika?
I'm jumping to verse 2, but it's interesting because Elijah reacts to that. The first thing he says is, what's the English one? What shall I do for thee? So he notices she doesn't ask a question. So his first, because when I read it first, it was striking that he's like, what shall I do for thee? And then in the next sentence, he'd tell me what hast thou in the house. And it's like, as if he doesn't even take a breath. Normally one should answer the first question, but he asks a question she already answered. But he says there's a question behind that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have to, it's brilliant. We have to solve this. It's this ma'eh selach, what shall I do unto thee, doesn't fit.
Yeah, it doesn't. It should have been before.
No, if you delete it, nothing is lost.
Right. Yeah. But that's a very, very good question. So we started with a wife, with a woman. And in verse 2, we have these two strange questions of Elisha. What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And the good question for me is, if I were a theater director, how would I tell my actors to stage this? Maybe Elisha has a long break in between, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and the woman does not answer anything. And then he says, tell me, what hast thou in the house? Or there is no break in between at all. And he just asks two questions, which actually makes no sense.
If you use the way they read in Hebrew, the te'amim, that your colleague Jolt is an expert, you will see your question is answered. Once you read it with the correct tune, it's one thing, it's one sentence. You see the main break is here. According to the tradition, babait is the main break. Ma'eh selach hagidi li ma yesh lach babait is one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty breathless.
Breathless, exactly.
What shall I do for thee? Tell me. It's like,
yes.
Yeah.
It's like pressing the button and he answers. Can we assume that Elisha actually knows this woman or her dead husband? Is that a
very good question?
Abdullah, you see, it says, I don't know, just from the text, I have no knowledge about this, but you know that thy servant did fear the God. So first of all, she calls him thy servant. Maybe Axel is right. He was a disciple.
maybe?
That my husband is your servant. But your servant could be also in the Bible, your servant could mean any, like the sons of Jacob come to Egypt and they call Jacob the slave of Joseph, your slave, our father. This was form of speech. But this is not, but he said, you know. How does he know? So probably he knew the husband.
Maybe that's why he was quick to immediately try to help this woman. Maybe that explains.
Yes, but why did he ask her, what shall I do for you?
Mm.
You know that we have this question, if I bring in some Christian tradition at the moment, we have it quite often that Jesus, when someone cries for help, Jesus asks, first of all, what shall I do for you? And only then waits for people to say something that I may see or that I may speak again, and only then he reacts. And sometimes in pastoral care, actually what we have learned, Axel, in our way of doing pastoral care, questions like these are sometimes very, very helpful. What shall I do for you? Especially if someone is really excited and this woman cries and shouts. So Elisha seems to be a very good pastoral caretaker because he first of all asks, what shall I do for thee?
I'll give you a 0 in pastoral care because you don't wait for an answer.
Yeah.
If this is your pastoral care, it's very bad.
But Rav Shabtai, in my Elisha has a long break here. Your ta'amim are very, very late century, but in the original, my Elisha, there's a long break, and he looks at this woman, and they build up a relationship at this moment, and only then he says, "Tell me what hast thou in the house," because he realizes, okay, that's the woman. So I think he is brilliant. He is brilliant as an example of pastoral care. But I'm not so sure. Abdullah, what would you say? You do also pastoral care, right?
Yeah, but Rav Shabtai is quite harsh in his grading, so I'm going to shut up here.
Yeah. I have another idea, but this only works in English and in German, not in Hebrew. If you put different emphasis on the sentence, what shall I do for thee? The interesting thing is that the next sentence, Elisha doesn't talk about himself or what he can do. He turns to the woman and gave her the initiative, or gave her the action. I mean, so maybe, what can I do for you? Look, what do you have in the house? I mean, it's not me. It's already there.
Very beautiful.
That's a brilliant observation, I think. That's wonderful.
Yes.
So Elisha, of course, could have said as well, okay, it's fine, you are right. I am somehow responsible for you as well, so I will help you and give you the money. And that's it. But this is what he does not do. But he asks her and gives her the agency back, and asks her, what have you in the house? That's right, yeah.
But does it work in Hebrew?
No, only because the I does not appear. It's swallowed. It is hidden.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It works very well.
But the idea works in Hebrew as well, of course. The idea that he doesn't say, okay, it's fine for me, I help you, but he asks her and looks what's happening here. Because I was wondering a lot about this question, and that's a good answer, Axel, really, because my question always was, did Elisha from the very beginning know what he wanted to do, or what kind of miracle he wanted to start, or whatever? But maybe he just learned this way what is the potential or the agency of this woman. That's right, yeah.
I want to ask a question then. I think in the New Testament you see it also, that, and you can see it, is there a message to the whole, is it just a holy story? Or is there a message in what Axel said? You have oil, okay, use the oil that you have. Maybe it's a message that it is subjective. You know, you say you don't have anything. So it's subjective view that you don't have anything. But then you don't have anything, it's not, think again. So she said, look how she answers. Vatomer ein leshiftecha kol b'bayit. The handmaid have not anything in the house. So the first answer is, what do you have in the house? So what does she say? Nothing.
Nothing.
Then he looks at her and says, really nothing? So she says, you know, after a thing, she says, Ki masuch shemen, I have a little bit of oil. So, so first she says, I have nothing. Then she says, okay, I have some oil. And then Elisha tells her, if you look at it properly, you have everything.
But that's a wonderful perspective, because when she comes to him, she really thinks, okay, there's nothing left. I have nothing. And then she is the one who says, okay, this pot of oil. So maybe she gives Elisha even a hint what could be done, or what is the potential left at this point.
Yes, but
Right.
I think she searches her mind. It looks like someone that, thinks, I have nothing. And then she thinks. Yes, I have
But
a few.
Rav Shapta, what you need here is another big break in the story. So she says, not anything in the house, long break. She thinks again. Elisha looks at her, and then she says, save a pot of oil.
He looks at her, but says nothing.
Yes. So we need long breaks, and they make the whole story. Maybe that's what is not written in the Bible. Maybe the important thing here. Axel, you wanted to say something?
I just what I find interesting, maybe she starts and expecting that Elisha expects her to answer that she has something very extraordinary in her house or something else. And well, there is nothing like it, but this small vessel of oil, which is something you use daily. It's not really
something.
Yes, it is something, but it's not you're not wealthy if you own a vessel of oil. Actually.
So open your eyes again and see what you actually have, even if it's the small little things, because something huge may get out of it, and something. Yeah.
Well, in the beginning, at verse 1, the woman cries out because she thinks she does not have anything. She is 100% poor. She's her sons are threatened by the creditor.
Why the creditor? Tell me, how do you see it? Where did the creditor come from?
Well, I would guess that her husband had some debts.
Exactly, it seems so.
Yeah.
So that's why she said, "My husband that feared the Lord incurred debts, and I cannot pay them."
Right.
I wonder what's the connection between the debt and the oil. Because in Islamic tradition, all the prophets have performed miracles. It's part of their job description. To prove that they actually talk with the dead people or God, they have to perform some miracles. And usually they are just not magicians. When they perform those miracles respond to those ethical, moral crises of their time. Miracles teach something, like Jesus healing the sick, opening the eyes of the blind. Medicine or lack of it was a major issue of that time, and therefore he performed a lot of miracles in that field. And Moses beating the magicians of the Pharaoh, because magic was the thing of that time. Does this connection between creditors and the oil tell us about particular context here? What is Elisha as a prophet trying to teach? I don't think he's only just doing hocus pocus or just feeding us. There must be something deeper here.
Yes, this is a very good question.
And the good point is really that the Bible does not tell us anything at this point, just gives us this story. And well, Axel's idea that she opens her eyes for something small, which they did not even think of when, first of all, the prophet asked, do you have anything in your house? Might be one idea, a very spiritual idea. So open your eyes, because there might be always something. And even if it seems to be small, this can be the basis of a miracle. Actually, I like this interpretation a lot, as it helps you to open your eyes. But maybe we find more. Maybe we find more in it, because when we continue reading, we see some social interaction of this wife with her neighbors as well. And that may be interesting as well.
So, but before that, I'll try Economics 1A, to help, introductory course of economics. Usually when you have a debt, So the debt talks about two people, the creditor and the debtors, and the debtor, and they have to agree. It's agreed there is a debt, and you have to pay it with something which is tangible, which is the debtor and the creditor accept it as payment. When a person is alone, he can say that the small thing that I have is worth millions for me. I'm not going to give it away for anything. This thing, for you remember the story of Navot, I'm going to sell you the king, my field. I'm not going to sell it for any price in the world. So economics talks about society, the neighbors, the people, the creditor. Then you need value, something which is the theory of exchange. You have to exchange something for something. You have to set a value. And she comes to Elisha. So Elisha, like Axel said, I cannot do anything for me. I'm not going to give you money. But what I'm going to do, maybe, I don't know, if I follow Abdullah's line of thinking, if you are alone, your perception will change. So the entire thing is, don't think like in the exchange theory, think of what you have as an individual. What?
No, go on. Why does she choose the oil?
Because that's the only thing that she has. So she has other things. I'm sure the children has clothes.
Yeah, but why is she choose? It's like, does it matter she chooses the oil, or asked differently, could she have chosen anything else and it would have worked? Like, why is the oil significant, or is the oil just something? Could it have been a table?
Could be, but could be the oil is in her perception something that she has, something that is very dear to her. Now, like you said, it's a daily thing that people use, but if it's the last commodity you have in the house, so this, you see, she thinks, Elisha makes her go into reflection. Like now she has to look in her mind and see her house, and see what does she have. So she, like in a movie, search for what you have, and the refrigerator is empty, the pots are empty, there is nothing there. And then she said, oh, I have this. So once she realized that she has something, maybe this is the point of the whole miracle. The miracle is actually a miracle of training to introspect, to reflect. If you have something, even if it's very small, this something could be infinite reaches.
So verse 2, in your perception, Rav Shabtai, would really be the most important verse of this little story, because you see here that everything changes with this. Actually, also with the first question of Elisha, what shall I do for thee? Also there, he redirects her way of thinking to giving her back the potential, and then he opens her perception for something which is there, the oil.
It's a small parable. A PhD student comes to you and says, listen, I research and all this, I have nothing to write about, I have no idea, I have no question, I have no research question, nothing.
And then I ask, what shall I do for you?
Think, do you have anything? He says, yes, I have this minor, I have this not significant idea. So all I tell her, listen, sit alone, don't talk to anyone, concentrate, and you'll see that it'll become something novel, interesting, brilliant.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice and very practical at the moment. So we are really dealing with a story of very practical pastoral care, right?
And not only pastoral care, I think it's an interesting story because of, if you look at society and social interaction, I mean, you have the prophet on the one hand, and you have a widow. So if you look at society, a widow is not usually not some kind of leading figure or something like that. A widow usually is one who is supposed to be needy, or someone who is supposed to ask others for help and support and so on.
It's an old tradition, the Quran also.
Yeah.
Yes, you are needy, you are downtrodden. There is no one to defend you.
And so she performs her social role, but Elisha empowers her in some way, and he does not really he does not really simply goes on and accepts the social differences. He does some empowerment to the widow at the bottom of the society, so to say.
Excellent.
And maybe actually we can really continue now and read what Elisha then says to her again in verse 3 and 4, because although this is, in my view, very, very interesting when I read it in your line now, that this kind of empowerment might also mean see what social relationship there is outside. You have neighbors. You have neighbors. At least this is a perspective she may not have seen before or not easily have seen before. So he gives her a very, very strange imperative. Go borrow the vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels. And thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him, and then we learn in verse 5 that she does exactly what he says here. So no more conversation. He sends her, and she does what he says. It's quite, in my view, verses 3 and 4 seem quite strange, because this is some kind of preparation of the miracle, but she doesn't seem to wonder. There is no question back, but she just does what he says. Any observations you have on these two verses, 3 and 4, on Elisha's commandment?
I have a speculation. I don't know if it's an observation. If somebody comes to you with a set of problems, low socioeconomic status, being a downtrodden at the bottom of the food chain with a lot of financial issues, with creditors, and not even and suffering poverty, I think by sending her to the neighbors and performing a miracle of abundance, I suspect Elisha is trying to improve her credit score. He wants to empower her, which could be a key to solving multiple problems all at once, to just improve and lift up her social status. She is someone who nobody thinks twice. She is ignored and disrespected. But here's a prophet of God taking her seriously and through her performing miracle, because Elisha makes sure go to few neighbors, go to multiple vessels, etc. I think this is an Axel said the word. It's an empowerment attempt.
Yes, and I can prove it because verse 5, usually in the biblical text, it says, "Vatas ken," that's what she did. But compare verse 5 to verse 3 and 4.
Could you scroll a little down? I just see.
So in verse 5, there are few details, but not the beginning. He told her borrow vessel. It doesn't say she borrowed vessels. It says she went from him and she closed the door.
Right.
And maybe what Abdullah said, I think the beginning of the empowerment was the daring to borrow empty vessels from the neighbors. It's very embarrassing. Again, something in Jewish tradition. There was a yeshiva in Europe that they tried to teach people to be independent. So the students used to go 2 o'clock in the morning and ring the bell by a pharmacist, apothecary and when the sleepy guy answered, they asked him for 1 kilo of nails. And he told them courage, not to be embarrassed, to look crazy, to be individualist, borrow empty vessels. It's crazy. What Abdullah said is 100% right. You ask for a neighbor, they know that you are downtrodden, they know your situation. Neighbors She closed the door the first time in her life, maybe now, but they know, they look in and they look through the window. They know she has nothing. And now she comes in and borrows empty vessels. Must be crazy. I wouldn't have dared. Why do I need empty vessels, empty pots? What for? And maybe Abdullah is right. This is the first step for the empowerment. Once she does this, she can do everything else.
So empowerment also to do crazy things or things which do not really seem to make any sense. Do you mean that?
Yes, and she has no answer because the neighbors would ask her, why do you need empty vessels?
Right.
She doesn't. Yeah.
Annika?
She doesn't get the vessels. The sons get the vessels.
Where?
She-
No. The son hands her the vessels.
But it's amazing that this point is not explicitly said in the Bible. When I read verse 5 correctly, we have again an open space, something like a gap in the text. She went from him, and then we do not really know what happens now. If she goes to her neighbors, if she sends her sons to the neighbors, the next thing we know, she shuts the door upon her and upon her sons, and then the sons bring the vessels they somehow got from the neighbors. But here in verse 5, as I would read it, we don't really learn what happened here. If she did exactly, if the sons did it, we don't know, right?
Right. But Umberto Eco writes very, very well that if you give all the details in the story, it'll be endless and boring and terrible. You have to leave some gaps of imagination. So it seems that whatever, maybe you see here a pastoral care, lesson A, here borrowing the vessels and closing the door is separate, two separate verses. Like you say, it's late, it's a te'amim, also the verses are late. I agree. Right. But whoever the tradition in the, let's say in the 4th century or 3rd century was like this, that these are two sentences. So I agree with Abdullah that borrowing the vessels was the first step. If she doesn't do that, she cannot proceed to the second thing. It won't work.